This program is brought to you by the Government Communication and Information System.
Yagamugela mbugeli to another episode of Citizens Connect khona la ku SABC2. Namhlanje kunezinto eziningi ekumele sikhulume ngazo. Top of the list is gender-based violence and femicide. This is an issue that is affecting our families, umphakathi wethu, as well as our country. It's time for us to meet two women who come from different backgrounds but are connected by one story.
I am originally from Grahamstown, now called Makanda. My mom had me when she was about 19. And when she had me, she was still in high school. And she had to leave school, right? So she raises me for about a year before she goes back to finish her matric. My dad was never present in my life. And so in the midst of all of that, my mother was an alcoholic, right? But I think only as I've kind of progressed and healed have I understood that it was actually depression. And so she self-medicated to numb all of the pain that she was going through.
My mom didn't care. Didn't show up. I didn't know her. We were right. And it was fine. I understand the concept of Kevin. Babam was a very present father until Ashona 2008. Shona 2008, Kokwam yakula. Very ill, I was in grade 8. I had to take care of Kokwam. I have to take care of my younger sister, Tanagit.
Sexual abuse or sexual assault is very prevalent in the work that I deal with, and to a large extent, when it's females, women and young children who are victims. Statistics are alarming. I think you might be aware of just the high numbers of women and young girls being victims of sexual abuse.
When I was 6 years, my mom took me away from my dad. And then I got raped by her cousin, and then they did nothing about it.
Next door to Ekaya Kulu, there was an uncle there, and I think he probably might have been the one to start it, but the memories are not very clear on whether it was the start, but he was part of the people who abused me. Next door to my grandmother's house was a guy who was probably, I think he was in high school when he assaulted me, and that was the memory that actually got triggered when the memories got back. And then the other guy was my friend's brother, older brother, who stayed not too far from my grandmother's house. And so I would go to visit my friend, and for some reason, she would always either be sent to the shop.
Let us have conversations about, sexual conversations in general, but also just educating our children on sexual, abuse as a society. And also, if kwenzeka ukuthi umalume, uye wathatha ingane endlini, let us talk about that. Gone are the days where we make family issues sacrosanct. Ukuthi sizoyenza family meeting iphele lapho, because the kind of clients I deal with are those who feel that justice has not been done to umalume because kwalaliswa phansi indaba.
These memories are between the ages of 6 and 9, right? That experience molded so much of my identity because it happened at such a young age. And so that distant child became a distant teenager, became a distant young woman, became a distant everything. I was never involved in anything when I was a child. I didn't play.
Like I felt that he was like that time. Unfortunately, the first year sathandana, second year I'm sorry, but angifuni abantwana, angeke ngizongwenzela umntwana, angifuni umntwana. And then that is where abuse That's it. Qalela abuse ukuthi aqala ngishaye, qala ngivictimize ngamagama. Useless, you're too big, fat. Akekho umuntu ozokuthanda. Azange bakuthande kini. You understand izinto ezinjalo? It like escalated to physical abuse. Angishaya. Even if nematseka happy ajabulile, I would, because I think it was ongishaya. You understand? But believe you me, being samthanda. Because I thought ukuthi uye kuphela umuntu. Athi ayina ngahamba. Ngiyele lapha kini ukona ukuthi khona umuntu ozokuthanda njengami akekho. And bengibelieve lokho, believe me. Bengibelieve ukuthi uye kuphela umuntu ongithandayo.
Teachers also play a huge role, and siyabonga irole yabo teacher, because it has gone beyond, pedagogy. They've also come to step into roles of being social workers, parents, etc. So teachers also pick up a lot of these symptoms. For example, because they spend a lot of time nabantwana esikolweni.
I met a teacher called Miss Sika, Tenjiwe Sika. When I tell you, I call her Mama, or I called her Mama. She was my saving grace. As a teacher, she took an effort to get to know me. And in her getting to know me, she got to know my brokenness. And so every second break, she would literally bring me to a class and she would counsel me. She would listen to me. I would cry. She would encourage me. And that woman is one of the many women who've caused me to be who I am today. Mama loved me. She loved me in ways that I didn't even know existed. And I went to varsity because of her. She paid all of my varsity applications. Had the schooling system not been there, I would have never met her. And I would have never been restored to a certain extent. So I think the education system assisted in kind of ukonibumba to make me a person who can see herself to have value within my context, but also within society.
Isizwe esinjani esingakwazi ukuvikela ingane zaso. I will hear from the experts nabantu abathintekayo kuleli daba. Stay with us. Welcome back, usabukele iCitizens Connect Konalagu SABC2, where you belong. Thank you so much for staying with us. Of course, sikhuluma ngenkinga esibhekane nayo in our community, and that is the abuse of children. As a nation, it is our priority to look out and protect abantwana abancane, kodwa that is not happening when we're looking at these statistics. So ugahle kahle inkinga iguphi, and here to help me discuss that are two women who you have already met. We've reflected on their story, Umabato no Sima. Of course, they live different lives, but their lives are connected by the topic that we are reflecting on today. Also with us is Shahima Yenage Ubuya Etedi Bear Clinic Nomzwandilege from Amataima. Thank you so much, everyone, for being with us. Thank you so much. And perhaps I'll begin the conversation with Zwandile, since you are the only gent here. Zwandile, talk to us as a society, according to you, what do you think is the problem? Why are we breeding abusers?
I think the first starting point is, let's look at Ekaya. Let's look at in each home at how we are branding the brand Indoda, a man in that house. How is the mother branding it? How is Abomalume branding it? How is Tina as men branding it? So that these young boys can say, oh, okay, because the guy can turn around and say, yeah, but my father did this for years and my mom was fine. So when are you weak when, right? So that's where we're at. We're at the point where people are justifying it because it's a behavior that they've seen and lived with.
What often happens in families, that if it's a relative, a close family friend, somebody that's been supportive to the family, when a child comes forward to make a disclosure, it's frowned upon. The child is then not only frowned but criticized and also threatened not to ever repeat this to anybody, because there's this total disbelief, discrediting the child's evidence, but also saying to the child that if you tell anybody, if you open your mouth again, we're going to be losing the support, the favor, everything that this person has brought into this family. So the child is then shut and trapped into silence. And we see this as a pattern. It's not an isolated case.
It is dangerous out there for every child. It is whether they're a boy child or a girl child. We do not know the criminal record of the teachers that spend 8 to 9 hours with our children. And it should be out there. It should be information that I'm able to come in and ask and say, well, can I have the background of this teacher?
Yeah. And exactly how are we performing when it comes to our criminal justice system? Abantu abaningi bakhuluma ngokuthi we are basically robbing our kids because we're letting them down. Where do we fare as a country?
We're bad. We're bad. You look at the stats. We're bad. The stats will tell you. There's more. The women in this country will tell you that we're bad because it's happening every single day. Then it's generationally happening.
So if we cast our mind to 30 years ago, and if we looked at the conviction rate, that firstly, 30 years ago, children's evidence was viewed with a lot of discrediting, and children's evidence was brought into disrepute. So the evidence was viewed with caution, and the conviction rate at that point was zilch, 0. However, if we look at the current situation presently as we speak, what we can proudly flag is that we are seeing children coming through our interventions regarding the court preparation program, where we're getting life sentences, double life sentences. So the conviction rates have certainly improved, and that more and more perpetrators are being brought to book.
I'm not saying it's not no good work is being done, but I'm saying it's platforms like this, it's shows like this that we need to come on and say, guys, we need to do more.
Having to protect umntanakho, having every night maulala, make sure umntanakho doesn't go through that. With my story, it's very difficult because no, even my mom, Bega protected the guy. I'd say, no, you're not gonna report this. I was 6 years.
I have a 3-year-old, and we will be in a shop and she's greeting everyone, and one, because of my personal experience, obviously then there's more pressure in that my response is no all the time. My no is extremely firm, which is unfair on a 3-year-old, right? It's unfair on a 3-year-old, but it was unfair on me as a 6-year-old. Because my no now is the 6-year-old me who's saying this shouldn't have been my experience.
We need to encourage behavior of talking about the wrong things that are happening to Abu Sisbetu, Lababaitu today. I mean, one of them at the age of 6. One of them is now a mother who has to make umntwana live in fear, not because of anything else, but because of what has happened to her. But then we say we have a great justice system. It's being honest.
Yeah.
It's doing exactly what you're doing. It's telling the truth. Life is not as what we experienced when we were growing up. Things have changed. It's making parental choices.
Firstly, I want to commend the 2 ladies that shared their narratives. It takes a lot of courage to come forward and break the silence, and that is what we keep on reinforcing out there with our little children, to actually give the voiceless a voice, and that's what they've done.
Me having to teach my child that you don't receive anything from strangers. Ian's knows even if ayikho endlini, I don't have to find it somewhere else, so that sing angatoli strength going in daughter. She must know guti strength sam it's myself. Even I'm missing in guti. Even if my mama corner or a gecko, I should have a big bone to say no.
What can we do better? There's a lot that can be done. If we look at the violence against children and violence against women, it's a systemic issue. And of course, collectively, when collective efforts are made, there's collaboration and integration and coordination of services. So not only government departments, but bringing in community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, civil society organizations to all work out and reach out to the communities.
The voice needs to go beyond just us having these conversations, but it has to go to action. It has to go to action.
Ladies, thank you so much for opening your hearts and being vulnerable with us. I know it's not an easy thing, so we really appreciate your time. All right, that's where we leave it for now. You're still watching Citizens Connect, Konalagu SABC2. After the break, we reflect more about what is out there and what is being done at a policy level, and also a little bit more about the responsibility that we have as citizens at home, in our homes, in our communities, in trying to end this problem. Hlala nathi. Welcome back to Citizens Connect. Thank you so much for staying with us. Of course, sisakhuluma ngendaba eyabantwana nokuhlukumezeka kwabantwana in our communities. Yini lento eyenza ukuthi sibe kulesimo lesi esikuso? And what are the possible solutions that we can try and address? So with me is Advocate Maluleke, who's going to speak to us about that and also find out what are the possible solutions. Mama, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Of course, it's an issue that is ongoing, an issue that is affecting every household in our country. But how would you summarize the extent of the problem in our country?
I think the extent is bigger than the criminal justice system. The challenge is that everybody is looking at the criminal justice system, but the justice system comes in after the fact. So the issue is every household, every family, every community needs to get involved, because the problem is at the household level, is at the community level, and the problem is big.
And how do we do that, especially when it's happening behind closed doors? Abuse thrives there.
I think if there's one thing that as a government and as society maybe we have failed to do, was to focus on empowering the family to be able to be a family.
We're a country that is great at developing policy, from the constitution to every policy and legislation that exists to govern every department. So we're good at that, but we are not great at implementation.
There's a program that we call treating gender-based violence as a pandemic. During the pandemic, everybody had a responsibility to protect themselves. You had to stay at home, you had to wear the mask, we had to do whatever. How do we empower communities to be able to protect themselves from violence? But how do you empower a parent to raise a child who is confident enough to be able to say, if a girlfriend says, I no longer want you, that young man must be able to say it's your loss, rather than say, if I can't have you, no one is going to have you, I'm going to kill you. He must be able to say it's your loss. You can't do better than me.
One of our many conversations on the show was how we have a legislation, and you mentioned this earlier on, laws in place, documents in place that we can look at to correct the challenges that we're talking about, but the difficulty still remains in the action. And so based on the suggestion that you're making, that it's got a lot to do with what happens in the household and in the family setup. How do we go about doing that and changing people's perceptions when they are reliant and influenced by things like culture, for example, or religion?
It is a big challenge, but let me tell you, there are examples of rural areas where you find the traditional leader being the one that is leading the issue of abstinence, not in a bad way, but encouraging young children to go to school, to complete, and when they complete a tertiary, they celebrate. They will kill 2 cows or whatever, and the whole community will celebrate. So you find that in that a community, everybody is looking forward to the day when they will complete their matric, because there's a celebration when they complete it, or even a tertiary and all those. So even though culture plays a role, but culture can change. Because it depends. I always say when I challenge traditional leaders, why are you no longer using those cars or wearing amabeshu when you go to work? It's because you have progressed. You wear suits. Why does culture have to remain when it comes to abuse of a wife? So it can grow. There are good things about culture, but the bad things must go.
Okay, ngenzulu kutheni, and yeah, some of the things, yeah, ukhuluma iqiniso, but it depends ukuthi ubuya kuphi, which community are you from.
I think it's great, and government is trying to have initiatives of trying to mitigate, but the challenge is the implementation.
What we're doing now as a Department of Women, as I said, that we are implementing the treating gender-based violence as a pandemic. Now, as a pandemic, as I said earlier on, that everybody had to protect themselves. You had to wear the mask, you had to stay at home or whatever. So that program says the all society approach, everyone from family to family, community to community, local municipality to local municipality, they must be doing something to end gender-based violence or to educate people. For example, I said social development trains on family, raising good families. They need to massify. It should no longer be a little project where they do it when they feel like doing it. It's something that they need to massify. But also we'll be using the media. We will be in the media. We've got some little funds for that. So that's why we say we'll be in the media. We want, when we talk about 365 days on 365 days of activism against gender-based violence, how do you then see something, communication or whatever, on the media, on radio and whatever, about gender-based violence or discouraging gender-based violence? But we want communities, as I said, traditional leaders will be meeting. We're working with COCTA because they are responsible for local municipalities and what, so that they coordinate. We're going to start in KZN. KZN has got about 43 municipalities. So we will be at each and every municipality. We want to empower the councillors to be able to work with family members and the communities where they are cutting the grass. We want to encourage the communities to cut the grass. Children are killed in places where the grass is long. How do you involve the communities to make sure that the environment is clean? So there are many things. It's not one thing that we'll be doing, but everyone needs to do something. Whole society approach, all hands on deck.
Yeah, definitely, and that sounds good. We're looking forward to developments there and seeing improvements. Of course,
we want partnership also from you, because we're saying all society approach. Everyone must be involved in addressing or eradicating gender-based violence.
Let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much, Mama. We've been speaking to Advocate Maluleke, of course, talking about the importance of introspecting and also identifying ukuthi everything starts with you, especially if we're looking at GBV as a pandemic. And that's how we wrap up the show tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Good night. We'll see you next time.